So this is the season finale of House of the Dragon, and this is my quick reaction, so beware there are going to be some spoilers. Because I came to a somewhat shocking realisation watching this episode, that being that I'm not sure I like this show. The production quality is fine, the costumes and sets were great as usual. The acting, I'm not sure reached Game of Thrones level, but it was mostly functional. The writing in places was very clever. The scripting in places was very well crafted. What I realised is that I found this whole season, and this episode in particular, kind of depressing, and on the whole, a bit of a downer. It left me with a bad taste in my mouth. I got to the end, and now I realise, in retrospect, I don't think I enjoyed it. There's just no one to root for in the entire series. In Game of Thrones we had imperfect heroes, we had anti-heroes, we had nuanced villains. In House of the Dragon there's nothing for me to hold on to. I've come to the end and I don't think I liked a single character in it. And I don't watch entertainment to make myself less happy. In Game of Thrones there were moments of genuine happiness to contrast with the brutal or horrible moments. Watching House of the Dragon I found to be an entirely joyless affair. Maybe try and think back for yourself, because when I do it, I can't think of a single moment watching this entire series when I smiled, or laughed, or had any sort of positive emotion whatsoever. And that for me is what House of the Dragon is badly lacking. The good moments with Tyrion and Bronn early in Thrones, the friendships between the men at the wall, the friendship between Ned Stark and King Robert. So what does this episode have to offer instead? At the start, Rhaenyra gets a visit from Rhaenys after she ran away from King's Landing after killing all of those civilians, and she's there to tell her that her father's dead. She goes on to tell her that the throne has been given to Aegon, her half-brother, so in Rhaenyra's view, the throne belonging to her has been usurped. And the stress of this revelation appears to cause her to miscarry the pregnancy, which she does. And as Daemon plots war and how to hurt the Hightowers and the Greens faction that have taken the throne from them, we get another prolonged scene of a woman giving birth. More screaming, more pain, and as nurses look on horrified, Rhaenyra gives birth to a dead baby. Is this entertainment now? Because I have to tell you, this does not bring me any joy. The endless horror with nothing in between just leaves me feeling numb and hollow. In Game of Thrones, we had genuine laughs, even in the very grim setting. Multiple times, Jerome Flynn made me laugh out loud. There were unlikely friendships, like Tyrion and Bronn. There was love, like Jon Snow and Ygritte. There was Tyrion and Shae. There was Arya and the Hound. There were moments of fun and positivity in the series, like Robb Stark falling in love with Lady Talisa, and this contrasted and emphasised the show's many darker moments. The Red Wedding stood in stark relief to those happy moments with its horror. In contrast, there's no relief in House of the Dragon. The horror and misery in House of the Dragon are pretty much a constant. It never lets up, and I don't think I like it. The show also does not have anything in the way of good moral lessons to teach. Quite the reverse. The actions in the show that get routinely rewarded are frequently grotesquely immoral acts. People get rewarded for murder and treachery, and the show is perpetually mired in a swamp of moral relativism. House of the Dragon time, so there are going to be spoilers. Like right away, starting now. Spoiler number 1, I still find the show depressing, and here's why. So I read an interview in which Emma D'Arcy, who plays Rhaenyra in the show, talked to the outlet GQ. The article was titled, "Emma D'Arcy breaks down the House of the Dragon Season 1 finale." End quote. Emma was quoted in this article as saying, "The currency of House of the Dragon is literally massive life events, and normally they're within the category of suffering and trauma." End quote. And yes, Emma, I noticed. It'd be very hard not to notice. My problem with this is that when the story is reduced to the large events, it gives no picture as to what people's everyday lives are like. It ends up reading like a births, deaths and marriages column in a newspaper, and it's frankly mostly deaths. So bear with me while I do a quick count up. In 10 episodes, Rhaenyra lost her mother in episode 1, her newborn brother in episode 1. Her lover and the father of her 2 children gets burnt alive in episode 6. Her dad dies in episode 9. And spoiler, in this episode, she miscarries her pregnancy earlier in the episode, and her second-born son is eaten by a dragon late in the episode. And this, for me, is frankly just too much for 10 episodes. And that's without even getting into what's happened to Damon, because how many people has he lost in 10 episodes? He's had 2 wives die. He lost his sister-in-law and nephew in episode 1. He lost his brother. It was his baby that was miscarried. Lucerys died, and now that I think about it, what relation is Damon to Lucerys? Oh God, here we go again. Well, Damon is Luke's mother's uncle, so Damon is Luke's great uncle. But Luke's mother is also married to Damon, so Damon is also Luke's stepfather, and when Luke gets married to Damon's daughter, Damon will also be Luke's father-in-law. Now, I've been trying for a lighter tone in my videos. I thought maybe people will get more out of watching my videos if I try to make them fun. Try and give people a laugh or two, make life feel a bit better. But how am I supposed to make this fun? How am I supposed to make miscarriage fun? Hang on a minute while I dig out my big book of dead baby jokes. In the interview, Emma goes on to describe the stillbirth scene, saying, "The advice Rhaenyra is receiving is to have patience, in the hope of preventing the child being stillborn or preventing harm to the child, and she ignores the advice, seeking instead to get this body out of her. And I think it's really fundamental, and it will be possibly divisive, but ultimately, I think she chooses her own bodily autonomy. She prioritises her own bodily autonomy. She literally says in the scene, like, get it out," end quote. So from this, it seems the showrunners and actors of House of the Dragon have intentionally made the show worse viewing, so they could pass a commentary on a woman's right to choose and the US Supreme Court's Roe v Wade decision. And I'm not even sure why I'm getting the 3rd degree on this one. I'm in the UK. There's sod all I can do about it. The interviewer goes on to ask, "It's the 4th graphic birth scene in 10 episodes. Are you aware of the criticism surrounding the frequent birth scenes?" And Emma responded, "I haven't seen loads of it, to be honest, but I take real issue with the idea that we shouldn't see women in labour depicted with gritty realism and blood and placentas, especially on a show where part of its USP is big, gory battle sequences. What it feels like is that we want women to conform to a certain image," end quote. Is that part of the show's USP? Big gory battle sequences are? Because if it is, you guys have royally screwed up. You've had one not great battle in 10 episodes, whereas you've had 4 lengthy birth scenes. The birth scenes probably had more runtime than the battle. The sex and the violence has always been a bit tawdry in Game of Thrones, but in retrospect, I still like it more than what House of the Dragon's offering. And nor do I feel it's about making women conform to a certain image. People are very complex. They love, they hate, they make love, they go to the bathroom. Going to the bathroom is a fact of life, but pretty much nobody wants to watch an hour-long video of you doing it. Probably even less so if it's depicted with gritty realism and blood. I swear to God, it's like Hollywood writers forgot that they're supposed to be in the business of producing entertainment. And sorry guys, seeing women screaming in pain is not my idea of entertainment. So the episode starts off and we have quite a good scene with Rhaenyra and her son Luke. He feels unready to be Lord Driftmark after the presumed death of Corlys Velaryon, and she reassures him, telling him that she'll help prepare him for what he needs to do. Meanwhile, Rhaenys, fresh from her escape from King's Landing, arrives on her dragon. Rhaenys comes in and tells Rhaenyra and Daemon that King Viserys is dead, and Aegon has been named as king. The stress gives Rhaenyra stomach pains, and she's heavily pregnant. Daemon asks how the king died. Rhaenys says she doesn't know, so Daemon says the king has been slain, on the basis of nothing at all. It was not like the king was well when you last saw him. Why do people like Daemon? He's mental. Damon is ready to declare war on the basis of nothing but his own assumptions. Rhaenys says that the Greens are coming for you, Rhaenyra. You and your children. You should leave at once. Damon goes off to organise the island's defences as Rhaenyra goes prematurely into labour, and it doesn't go well. Rhaenyra loses the baby, and bloody hell, how am I supposed to make this funny? Under orders from Rhaenyra, Jace halts Damon's plans to contact allies and begin a war. So instead, Damon busies himself by giving a loyalty test to some of the knights, saying that they can pledge for Rhaenyra, or the dragon he's menacing them with can give them a quick death, but if they betray them later, they'll not get a quick death, and they'll die screaming instead. Damon, you see, is truly a prince among men, and no doubt there will still be women standing for him. There'll probably still be people standing for him later on in the episode after he gets annoyed and starts choking his niece wife. But on the other hand, the CGI dragon looks great. Rhaenyra is then made queen with the crown that Sir Eric brought from King's Landing. I was not sure which one of the twins it was at first, Eric or Arik, so I had to look it up on IMDb. Apparently the one with the crown is Eric, so Rhaenyra takes her father's crown that good Sir Eric nicked before he bravely ran away. Rhaenyra and Daemon hold a war council. They make their plan to send envoys to the Starks, River and Storm's End to try and recruit them as allies. And should Rhaenyra even be up? After a miscarriage, she should maybe be off resting instead of being up and about. It's a traumatic thing. It's not like a miscarriage, it's something that a person just shakes off. A ship arrives carrying Sir Otto in what's probably the dumbest part of the episode. So Otto crosses the thin walkway to get to Dragonstone, and Daemon comes to meet him. Otto asks Daemon, "Where's the princess?" And just at that moment, Rhaenyra flies over them on a dragon. It was bad enough when she was moving around, but Rhaenyra riding a dragon around just after she miscarried a baby is idiotic. This whole scene kind of is. Even now, with all the benefits of modern medicine, it takes several days to several weeks to recover from something like that. Sir Otto and some knights come across the bridge, and Rhaenyra lands behind them on her dragon, so they're now trapped. She nearly buckles the bridge by landing a massive death lizard on it. And is that the only way into Dragonstone? What are they going to do if she collapses the bridge? Rhaenyra then gets off of her dragon, off camera. And how did she get off that dragon exactly? You showrunners couldn't think of a way that didn't look silly, could you? How did she get off that big dragon on that narrow-ass bridge? Did she slide down its neck like Fred Flintstone on a Brontosaurus's neck? And then she walks through the middle of Otto and his men. And one of them could have just stabbed her. They could have maybe ended the war right there. They may have died, but why would she take that chance? She doesn't even know what they're there for. At this stage, Rhaenyra doesn't even know they're there to deliver a message. As far as she knows, they could be there just to kill her. And again, we have a victory of style over substance, because that's what this entire scene is. They thought it would look badass for her to fly in on her dragon, that it'd look badass for this empowered woman walking through her enemies like they're nothing. They aimed for badass, and it ended up just being ass, because their actions make no sense whatsoever.
Could you make me a cup of tea, please, Stephanie?
But people love to stick their neck into like hornets' nests.
Of the many criticisms I was left with after watching Game of Thrones, In places, I think for me, it did at least manage to be sexy, like Jon Snow and Ygritte, or Robb Stark and Talisa, even maybe Shay and Tyrion managed it in places. Sadly, the same cannot be said of House the Dragon, and now that I look back at the relationships in Game of Thrones, they maybe were a bit cookie cutter. Now that I write them all out, they all kind of started out the same way and went the same way. They all started out confrontational and grew into romance. How did I not see that before? Game of Thrones seems to have had the same structure in their sexual relationships over and over again. When Jon Snow met Ygritte, there was a battle and he captured her. When Robb Stark met Talisa, she was angry with him because she was having to treat the wounded after a battle he started. Shay was angry at Tyrion at first because she'd essentially been grabbed in the middle of the night. Arya was very harsh with Gendry at first. Jaime Lannister and Brienne of Tarth, and hang on, it's always the women that are angry too. This is a thing, isn't it? This is a thing in Japanese writing and fiction. I've seen it in anime and manga. It's a character development process that depicts a character with a personality who is initially very harsh before gradually showing a warmer, friendlier side over time. It's called tsundere. If you don't know the term, the word is Japanese, and according to Wiki, it's derived from the terms sun, to turn away in disgust and anger, and dere, to become affectionate. How have I not seen that before? Now I think about it, I've seen it quite a few times in women in the real world too. And they basically, now that I think about it, tell the same love story over and over again in Game of Thrones. A man and a woman meet, there's mutual attraction. The woman is aggressive and angry but softens over time, and nobody ever seems to get a happily ever after. Ygritte tries to kill Jon Snow and gets killed herself. Robb and Talisa die at the Red Wedding. Tyrion kills Shay after her betrayal. Jon kills Dany. Arya leaves Gendry. Jaime leaves Brienne. Dany leaves Daario. And talking about that, what even happened to Daario Naharis? He got left behind by Dany as caretaker in Slaver's Bay, and that was the last we ever saw of him. What a terrible way to end his character arc. I'll also never forgive the TV series for dropping the character of Strong Belwas from the show version. This constant need to subvert expectations is frankly getting very stale. If you do it every time, it becomes just as predictable as fan service, and when you do subvert someone's expectations, you're supposed to do it in a good way. It's like me going to a bar, ordering a drink, and a hot barmaid slips me her number on a napkin. That's subverting my expectations in a good way. If I order a drink and instead she kicks me in the crotch, that will still be a surprise, but it won't be so welcome. Anyway, I digress. I was saying, Game of Thrones could be sexy at times. If I was not turned on before I started watching an episode of Game of Thrones, there are scenes in it that could maybe turn me on by the end of the show. I mean, just that scene when Natalie Dormer tried her best to seduce Renly in Game of Thrones almost sent my boxer shorts flying across the room like Barbara Windsor's bra in Carry On Camping.
Fling and in, and fling. Matron, take them away.
Sadly though, it didn't work for Renly. He only had eyes for her brother, but if there ever were a test for if someone is gay or not, that could be it. House the Dragon, on the other hand, is the opposite. I could start watching any episode of season 1 of House the Dragon turned on, and by the end, it would have been like I'd had an ice cold shower. It is, if anything, anti-sexy. Even that scene in Game of Thrones where Melisandre put leeches on Gendry was sexier than House of the Dragon. That at least had Carice Van Houten in it. But on the other hand, the show can be enjoyed on many levels. I watched the episode with other people again and asked them afterwards what they thought of it. One man in the group predictably again said, "I thought it was good. There was a lot of good dragon action." And one woman said that she didn't really care for it. I asked her why, and she said, because the little dragon got ate. So, where did I leave off last time? Oh yes, it was that god-awful scene where Rhaenyra presumably Fred Flintstones down her dragon's neck, presumably carefully avoiding all of the spines, and walk right through her enemies with nary a care in the world, just trusting them not to kill her. And this has given me flashbacks to late Game of Thrones again, and that terrible scene where Daenerys went to King's Landing and stood in front of several giant siege crossbows. The same giant crossbows that have been shown could bullseye a dragon from several kilometres away. So Daenerys stood still a few hundred metres away and just relied on Cersei Lannister choosing not to kill her. Otto delivers his message that he wants Rhaenyra to submit to Aegon's rule, and in return she can keep everything that she has. He then leaves, and Rhaenyra lets them go in peace, against Daemon's very reasonable wishes to kill everyone. They go back inside, and later Rhaenyra tries to explain to Daemon about the Song of Ice and Fire, how the realm must be united against the dark, and I still can't believe they're going there. The Night King was a damp squib. For Pete's sake, stop reminding me of the bad parts of Game of Thrones. Arya King the Night King was a disastrous end to multiple story arcs. Daemon gets bored of listening to Rhaenyra tell him about prophecy, so he decides, very rationally and very heroically, to just choke a bitch like he's a pimp and she owes him money. The problem with this being that she isn't a hoe and he isn't a pimp. She's his wife who just miscarried, and also now the Queen of the Seven Kingdoms. I mean, oh my, I can see why this character's making some of the ladies swoon. Meanwhile, Corlys is being told by his wife Rhaenys about what's happened while he was sick. He's told about the king's death, about Aegon's coronation, and that his brother is dead, killed by Daemon. And frankly, he doesn't even seem very bothered. He's fed up with it all and decides to pledge for neither the Greens or the Blacks. This is until his wife points out that this is hardly an option, because even if their house stays out of it, their grandchildren don't have that luxury. So Corlys goes to join Daemon and Rhaenyra's faction, despite him thinking that they killed his son, and despite knowing that Daemon killed his brother, on the grounds that Rhaenyra is trying to avoid war, which is not much justification, because so's Alicent. So Daemon may be even worse off than Isildur from the Rings of Power. At least Isildur had a horse that cared about him. Daemon is dead, and everyone, including his brother, essentially say, oh well. Corlys tells Rhaenyra, our houses are bound by common blood and common cause. And this makes little sense, because the Greens faction are relatives of his as well. This is nonsense. But Corlys joins their faction. Let's see now. So Corlys joins the Blacks. Showrunners, did it not occur to you that this could maybe come across as a bit racist? I still think if they were going to race swap characters, the Hightowers would have been a far better option than the Valyrians. It would have avoided all this and the parentage farce. So Rhaenyra sends envoys on dragons to allied houses. Jace goes to Winterfell, Daemon to Riverrun, and Luke to Storm's End to try and garner their support. Rhaenyra says that if it's to be war, they will not strike the first blow. Her sons swear to not start any fights and just go to deliver the messages. The camera focuses on Jacaerys as he goes to Storm's End in the middle of a storm and lands. And there's already a big bloody dragon there. He walks in and, oh dear, Aemond is there already, treating with Lord Baratheon. And Aemond has already made a better offer of marriages in exchange for the Baratheon's support. Luke, on the other hand, is empty-handed, so Lord Baratheon tells him to get lost. So Luke turns to leave to take the Baratheon's refusal back to his mother, and Aemond tells him to wait. He wants one of Luke's eyes in return for the one he lost when Luke hit him with a knife, and one way or another, he means to have it. Lord Baratheon says that this will not happen under his roof, so Luke leaves, and he really shouldn't have dawdled. Luke goes back to his dragon in the middle of the storm, and the CGI looks off somehow. The lighting on Lucerys doesn't seem to match the rest of the scene. Luke takes off and is pursued by Aemond on his dragon, still determined to have one of Luke's eyes. There's a chase as Aemond makes his dragon pursue to torment his younger relative. Partway through the chase, Luke loses control of his dragon as it panics and spits a gout of flame into the face of Aemond's much larger dragon. And then Aemond loses control of his dragon and he cannot stop it as it closes in on Luke and his dragon. The episode ends with Aemond's dragon eating Luke and his smaller dragon, biting it into pieces. As Aemond makes a shot, "What have I done" face, knowing that what he's done is probably start a war. And that's it for season 1. So, on the whole, what do I make of it? There's a good story in there, and technically it doesn't do much wrong. But it gets undermined by the time skips, the character changes, the grim tone of the second half of the season, and for me, it falls well short of the quality shown in early seasons of Game of Thrones.
Could you make me a cup of tea, please, Stephanie?